Alright, so now we're at part 2. We're going to move on to presidential powers. If the president becomes frustrated with Congress, he can exercise his power in the following 4 ways. However, while these powers do not require congressional approval, they are not law, so they set no binding precedent onto future presidents. There's quite a tongue twister there. No binding precedent onto future presidents. They are in effect only while the same president holds office, unless the next president wishes to keep them. So they're essentially sunset clauses. Bill Clinton had one of these for gun control in his administration. So, the 4 ways the president can exercise his power if he becomes frustrated with Congress. The first of these are recess appointments. If the Senate is being awkward with your appointments to the Supreme Court, wait for them to go on holiday and then give them the job. Because then the Senate can't really argue back if it's on holiday. Executive agreements. These are agreements between the President and other countries' foreign leaders. They do not need Senate approval. For instance, when Trump's deals with Kim Jong-un took place under the Trump administration between 2016 and 2020 as means to alleviate some tensions between the countries. Signing statements. These are official pronouncements issued by the President at or near the time a bill is signed into law. If the President deems a bill to be unconstitutional or ill-advised, he can veto it instead of signing it, so he can throw it out and not agree to it, but if he does this too regularly, it will pass without his signature being required. Executive orders are a rule or order issued by the President having the same force of a law. Foreign powers, most relevant talking about George Bush Jr., his administration in the 2000s. In a crisis, the president can do as he pleases as a diplomat, but in peacetime, his foreign policy powers are vague. As commander-in-chief, the president can negotiate treaties with whomever he likes. Congress declares war, and military acts must pass a vote in the Senate. Presidents set the tone of foreign policy in public speeches, typically in their State of the Union speech. These are 2 examples of different presidents' foreign policy to use in your exam. So the first of which is the Bush Doctrine, famously something that you will now know that Sarah Palin did not know when she was running for VP with John McCain. So the Bush Doctrine essentially established that you should attack countries holding terrorists preemptively, so before they actually attack you. And the Obama Doctrine stipulates a more persuasive and diplomatic approach with drone strikes, a withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan, well, a partial withdrawal, technically, and Obama is quoted as saying, "We will extend our hand if you unclench your fist." And that's a very good quote to remember if you want to use that in your exam if you ever have a question on the foreign powers of the president, or just the president's powers in general. So, checks and balances on the executive branch. Only Congress can ratify international treaties. Some congressional powers can be delegated to the president, such as the power to impose trade tariffs against countries engaged in unfair trading practices. This power was extensively used by Trump against China. All congressional bills must be signed by the president. The president's power of veto can be overridden by Congress, but they need a significant majority, and this is called a veto override. The president is the chief executive of the federal government, so he proposes the annual federal budget. This power is checked by the fact that Congress must approve of these proposed bills and budgets by voting for or against them. There's a recent example of this with Joe Biden's infrastructure bill, which I believe was blocked by the Senate. I know it was blocked anyway because it was proposing far, far, far too much spending that would drastically inflate the US dollar. So, the enumerated powers of appointment are checked by the Senate, as they must approve of all Supreme Court justices. The President can also direct policy, but he needs congressional approval to do so. The President and elections. The first 18 months are most important to ensure re-election, as after this, a president is busy with midterms and their campaign. At this point, they are dubbed lame duck presidents, and that's a term that you should know for your exam. Only 3 modern presidents have lost re-election, and these are Trump, Carter, and Bush, although some others have been either assassinated or resigned, such as Nixon and JFK. Their average approval rating for their first term is 63%, but this usually drops to 43% for their second term. A president may not have the popular vote, but still win an election due to faithless electors in the Electoral College, or due to the distribution of their voter base among the states. Key terms to use in your exam regarding the president are electoral mandate, which is the greater the number of votes for the winning candidate, the greater the legitimacy they have to pass the legislation they propose in their manifesto. Public approval, which is the popularity of the president determined by polling. Their first and second term, being obviously the first term is for the first 4 years they hold office after the first election. Second term, they are elected again, which is the golden standard for presidents, and then they will serve for 8 terms, providing they do not resign or die while they are in office or are impeached. A unified or a divided government. If the Senate and House are controlled by the same party, it is a unified government, and not much can stop them from legislating. But if one chamber is controlled by the opposition, it is extremely difficult to legislate. In a crisis, the rally effect usually kicks in, and everyone turns to the president, which can boost his popularity. The biggest example would be George Bush Jr. after 9/11. So, some examples of presidential executive orders. Obama's, he gave gays the right to have council houses. He gave gays sick pay. He said that gay couples are entitled to formal equality under the law, and all undocumented immigrants get citizenship in 2014. So he tried to give loads of illegal and undocumented immigrant citizenship through an executive order. However, fortunately, Texas, New Mexico, and Nevada disagreed with this, and the question went to the Supreme Court, who ruled 5-4 that Obama did not have that power. And under Trump, his executive order stipulated that all water pipes were to be ripped up and replaced. He put a ban on Muslims entering America. In response to this, Sally Yates refused, so Trump fired her. And improvements to border security and immigration security. The media deemed it controversial to temporarily separate children from parents at the border. However, this was necessary to prevent child trafficking. If you watched politics at that time, you will likely remember all the news articles that were trying to bash Trump for his policy of separating children from their parents at the border, and they used photographs of children in cages which had actually been taken under the Obama administration. But I digress, it's just important to know both sides of the story. The origins of presidential powers. So where do these presidential powers come from? Well, some of them come from the Constitution, and these are called constitutional powers, originating from Article 2 of the US Constitution. Delegated powers, which come from Congress, and they are delegated to the President, hence the name. Implied powers, these are not these do not come from the Constitution, nor do they come from Congress, but they are heavily implied in the Constitution. For example, the power to declare a state of emergency. Formal powers, these are expressly codified in Article 2 of the Constitution, and they include appointment powers, so Supreme Court justices and the Vice President, legislative powers, proposing and vetoing bills, setting the tone of foreign policy, so choosing either diplomacy or military aggression, and the power of pardon, meaning pardoning prisoners. There's a recent example, I believe there was a petition when Trump was just leaving office in 2020 that he should release the Tiger King Joe Exotic from prison, but obviously nothing came of it. It's just a fun thing to know. Informal powers, these are uncodified, so they are not written down, and are essentially conventions that date back to the inception of the American Republic. And finally, the power of persuasion is the ability to persuade the governed to support new legislation, and the power to persuade foreign leaders, obviously because the American president has a lot of influence on other countries. And I'm not going to rattle through this. I just thought I'd include a list of all modern presidents in order and the years which they held office, so the years of their administrations. Because I think that would be useful in the exam, and it's quite difficult to get it online. They're usually quite obscure with getting a list, and it just saves you time. So that's it for the office of the president. I hope it has helped you for the A-level government and politics America unit exam. Thank you.